What are the games of the year in this beautiful sport that we all love, college football? We're less than 60 days away from toe, meat, and leather in week 0. Gosh dang it. So freaking excited. So freaking excited to have you here. We got a lot to unpack here as the season gets ever closer. Like I just said a second ago, going to talk about the games of the year. Going to talk about some more of your college football's greatest unknowns. Going to talk about some of the potential, maybe practice periods going on around the country when it comes to Michigan and their hope to beat Georgia this coming season. Also, want to close this whole thing out and talk a little bit about, USC's record prediction for the 2023 season from a win-loss standpoint. All right. So glad to have you here. Welcome into the Hard Count. We talk ball every single day, Tuesdays, Thursdays, 10 a.m. Central, 11 a.m. Eastern. We are always here, right here on the On3 YouTube channel. So make sure you're subscribed. You got a lot going on. We're just talking ball here for the next hour. All right. So kick them up, whether you're at your job, whether you're at school, whether you're doing the summer internship, whatever it is, just sort of kick them up. We're talking ball. This is a safe place. We're very, very glad to have you here. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Also, make sure you're locked in on the podcast because that's a place where we consistently are putting out content. There's times where we're not live on this YouTube channel. It'll be a premiere setting as it is on 4th of July. For the podcast, though, it don't change. Same time, every Tuesday, every Thursday. That'll be in your podcast feed. Spotify, Apple Music, doesn't matter how you get it. All right, let's get right into it now. We can't afford to waste any time here. The games of the year in college football. Got to thinking now as we're getting closer and closer to this season, what are the games of the year? And it's tough to assess because we haven't even, had any games yet, so we're kind of just speculating. And I want to make this clear, too, off the top. This is not an exhaustive list. So Michigan, Ohio State, of course, going to be a game of the year. Alabama, LSU, going to be a game of the year. We tried to steer clear from just those general, typical rivalries we're going to get because I feel like that's kind of a given. But let's get into it a little bit here. Week 1, we got a game of the year, in my opinion. Because last year, week 1, it was a game of the year with LSU and Florida State. This will be on a Sunday. And this game, if you look at it from the outside looking in, it just has everything. The loser of this game loses their mulligan for the rest of the way. Meaning, if you drop this game, if you're Florida State or LSU, you got to go perfect throughout the rest of your schedule. Florida State still has to play Clemson. LSU, they have to play in the SEC. So both these teams are going to have their work cut out for them should they lose. Now, should they win, you get some breathing room. You have a chance to potentially drop one game, though neither team plans on dropping a game the rest of the year. But if you do drop a game, you're not out of the race. But if you drop 2, history tells us you're out of the college football playoff. So very, very high impact kind of game. It's going to be an elite atmosphere, neutral site. I would imagine both fan bases will travel well. Florida State won this game on a blocked extra point at the end of regulation last year. So everything is set up for this one to be electric in every sense. You look at both rosters, too, loaded with talent. Like, neither team is really in climb back mode so much. Florida State, they have aspirations to play for the college football playoff this year and win the ACC. Like, for them, it is set up to be the year. Jordan Travis is back. Jared Verse is back. Number 1 in returning production. And all of college football are the Seminoles. So this is their year, is what they're thinking in Tallahassee. Now, for LSU, going into last season, Brian Kelly pulls up. New head coach. A lot of talk about his accent preseason. We all knew that was garbage. Y'all that were tuned in here. And a lot of LSU fans were told from people like myself, hey, this is a get your feet wet kind of year. We were trying to temper expectations and say, hey, it might be a build up to it kind of year. Like, if it doesn't go your way in 2022, that's okay, because 2022 isn't what you hired Brian Kelly for. You hired him for the future. And so as soon as we said that, LSU went on a run, made it to Atlanta for the SEC title game. They beat Alabama. Like, they did a lot of things in year 1 that maybe this time last year we weren't expecting. And so LSU fans are thinking, okay, if last year was the warm-up, if last year was the get the feet wet year, then this year it's about to be on and popping. Like, this year, we're coming for all of it. This year, we're coming to get back to the college football playoff. So for both fan bases and both teams, they have high expectations. Going to be electric in every sense of the word. I'm fired up for this one. It will have everything that we're looking for in a big-time college football game. Week 1. Not on a Saturday, it'll be on a Sunday, but week 1, man, we're getting big-time college football. Make sure you're subscribed right here. Like I've already mentioned a couple of times already throughout this show, we want you a part of this. There is a strong portion of y'all from our YouTube analytics that are yet to be subscribed. So if you're locked in, if you're subscribed, phenomenal, thank you. If you haven't yet joined the party, college football season, less than 60 days away. No time like the present. Would love to have you a part of this. All right, we keep on rolling here. Another game of the year. We're going to talk about a game in October, November. No. We're going to week 2. Week 2 for our next game of the year, and that's Texas going to Tuscaloosa, Alabama, September 9th. Don't be surprised if you find the hard count is actually going to be at this game. Don't be surprised if that happens. We're not announcing it right now. We're going to see how this thing unfolds, but don't be surprised if you find out that we're going to be at this game. This will have a little bit of extra juice, in my opinion, too, because it's going to be a future SEC matchup. So Alabama, I'm sure the good people in Tuscaloosa would love to show some hospitality to our friends from Austin as they make their way to the SEC. And this game, to me, we start getting some answers because there's no weak opinions anywhere in the country about Texas or Alabama. And the majority opinion on Texas is they're trending upward. They're on their way upward. They're climbing the steps. They're in year 3. You got Quinn Ewers going to hopefully be in his own. You have Steve Sarkisian, have that culture now solidified. You got a roster now at a place to where it's really Steve Sarkisian's guys. Like, everybody is believing that Texas is on their way up. Now, on the flip side of that, the majority opinion on Alabama is that Nick Saban and Alabama are no longer the kings of the college football world. And a part of that is true because Georgia's got couple of natties to show for it that they are the kings right now, but everyone's kind of just discrediting what Alabama's going to be this year because we don't know what they're going to be at the quarterback position. They've got a lot of unproven pieces on the offensive and defensive side. You got 2 new coordinators. Like, everyone's just sort of assuming that Alabama is on the decline. And so you can have those opinions preseason about Texas and about Bama, but we get to line it up in this game and actually find out where they're at. So it'll be a great litmus test for us. If Texas wins, they go into Tuscaloosa under the lights and shock however many thousand people in Bryant-Denny Stadium. I think the narrative coming out of that game will be all the hype, all the talk, everything we've said about Texas, about what they could be, might be, should be, it's all validated in that game. Now, to be clear, this is just week 2, so they're going to play a whole lot of games after this one, and we'll find out what Texas is really going to be. But this would be one of those wins where you look at Steve Sarkisian and his time at Texas, and this could be kind of that signature win, if you will. Beats his former boss and really cements that, hey, Texas right now, they're going to be a team you have to deal with. Kind of a statement game for them, if you will. Now, for Alabama, if they win this game, the conversation shifts back to, all right, we're still the big dog. We're still a big dog, to say the very least, in the college football landscape. Like, you want to talk bad about Bama all offseason and say what they weren't going to be? Well, we just took care of business at home against the team that y'all were talking about and what they were going to be in a positive way. So for Alabama, this kind of be the, as I like to call it, the Saban flex, if you will. Everyone's saying this, that, and the other about Bama, and then depending on how they handle business, let's say Alabama goes out and just does what we thought they were going to do a season ago and they win this game by a couple of scores, then Alabama kind of puffs out the chest and just says, remember us? Remember that script day? Yeah, we're not going anywhere. So again, they're going to play a lot of games after this. I don't think we make definitive statements about either team after this game, but it'll be a really interesting test for us to see if all the talk in the offseason, we get some answers. Should be a lot of fun. Now we fast forward to October for this next game of the year. Again, not an exhaustive list. A lot of games that are going to be played in between week 2 and October 21, but this is one that I have circled, and it's Penn State at Ohio State. And to me, this is all about establishing that pecking order within the Big Ten. Because Penn State, a lot of the belief in State College is that this could be the year where we catapult into either the top spot in the Big Ten or we put ourselves right behind Michigan. Like, they're tired of going 10-2 in Happy Valley. They've done that. They've won the Rose Bowl. Like, they love Sean Clifford, but a lot of the excitement is around Drew Aller and what he could be for them offensively. We had James Franklin, head coach of the Nittany Lions, on this very show. He told us we have a chance to be better on the offensive side of the ball. We've got more talent and depth defensively than we've had here in a long time. We got a quarterback who can make all the throws. Like, all the pieces are there on paper for Penn State to make that ascent in the Big Ten pecking order. This is a game where they really get a chance to do it. Because Ohio State, they haven't won it the last couple of years, but they've been widely considered one of, if not the top dog in the conference for recent history, really since Ryan Day has been there. For Penn State to take a swing at the big dog, one of the big dogs, I should say, and to kind of slay the dragon of sorts, like that would be enough for me to say, okay, Penn State is going to be a team we got to talk about in the college football playoff. They're a team we got to talk about in terms of winning the Big Ten. So for Ohio State now, the thing for them is don't get passed by Penn State while you're trying to chase Michigan. Because to be clear, they are in chase mode right now. They've been beat by Michigan soundly the last 2 seasons. We were on hand for one of them. It was not close. They finished the deal, did Michigan against Ohio State. But Ohio State now, while they're trying to catch Michigan, you got to look over your shoulder and see Penn State is churning and burning and trying to find a way to be considered one of those top-tier teams. So this game, I think, will really give us a good idea for where these teams sit in terms of the future with the Big Ten. And I think either result, whether it's an Ohio State win or a Penn State win, it's a statement kind of game. Like if Penn State wins, it's a statement, okay, we are now one of those top 2 teams in the Big Ten, for this season at least. For Ohio State, if they were to win this game, it's reestablishing, no. Penn State, maybe you'll have your time in the future, but with this roster, with Marvin Harrison Jr. still here, with all the guys who got back on defense, like we still got some unfinished business. The standard's still the standard here. That one's going to be a lot of fun, man. I tell you what, I don't know what our travel plans are going to be for October, but if we can get out to a game in October in Columbus, this might be one to get to. So, again, Penn State's going to play Michigan later in the year. Ohio State play Michigan later in the year. Those are going to be enormous games, but this is our first chance to really see what is Penn State made of and what is Ohio State made of, too. That's going to be a really good test for us to figure out what they're made of there. Notre Dame at Clemson, November 4th. This is another game that has enormous playoff implications. Notre Dame is going to play Ohio State and USC in their schedule. And if they can get a win against Clemson, if they get a win against Clemson, again, 2 years in a row, they got one last year in South Bend. If they do it in Death Valley, what would that say about Marcus Freeman? What would that say about the direction of Notre Dame under Marcus Freeman? I think we would all have to start taking them very, very seriously as it comes to the college football playoff picture. And for Clemson, kind of the other side of the coin, if you will. Like Dabo Swinney, there's been a lot of talk about his way of doing things and the way they don't use the portal. And now they hired a new OC with Garrett Riley and they got Kate Klubnik. Like the expectations are extremely high, but the pressure is also extremely high at Clemson, South Carolina. And so a game like this, if Clemson were to drop 2 in a row to Notre Dame, I think there would have to be a reassessment of sorts as to their approach. And I don't mean they're going to go to the portal. I don't mean they're going to just, redo their whole staff. But that would be 2 years in a row where you lose. And I would imagine if you lose this game, it's because Notre Dame would be the more physical team. And they definitely were the more physical team a season ago. DJ Uiagalelei caught a lot of flack last year for what he didn't do in this game. But Notre Dame was able to run the ball essentially at will, it felt like. I believe they had somewhere over 200 yards rushing in that game last year. So it's going to be a toughness test for Clemson. And for Notre Dame, it could be that statement of like, hey, we've arrived. Marcus Freeman has been very, very clear. Like the standard is still the standard at Notre Dame. I don't care that we haven't won a national title in a minute here. Like we're still Notre Dame. That brand still means something. And I think that has endeared him to a lot of Notre Dame fans because of that approach. But this is going to be the game where I think it's sort of a coronation of sorts if they were to get it done. So that'll be a lot of fun to watch in November. Playoff kind of football. Last game I want to talk about here for the game of the year. This could be the game of the year in the Pac-12, and it's USC at Oregon. This could be a Pac-12 title preview. Because remember now, the Pac-12, no more divisions. They just take the top 2. So USC's actually gone to the Big Ten next year, so their last go around in the Pac-12. But don't be surprised if we see this game again in the Pac-12 title game. But for USC, they have just the gauntlet to end their season. I mean, the last 6 games are just absolutely brutal. Play Utah. They play, obviously, Oregon. They play Notre Dame. They got UCLA. Like, it is just the absolute works, the Hunger Games for USC to finish the year. This is their second to last game of the season. They get UCLA after Oregon, but you got to go to Eugene. You got to go to Autzen Stadium, and that place will be rocking. Could be another college game day stop. For USC, if they are undefeated up to this point, or let's just say they have 1 loss up to this point, it's the second to last game of the year, you would imagine they probably are at least, I don't know if they're a favorite to make the college football playoff if they win out, but a 1-loss USC team is going to have a really good chance. I don't know if they control their own destiny. They're going to have a really good chance, but the thing about USC, if they have one loss or if they have no losses, this will be the last couple of steps for them on the tightrope of what their schedule is. And the last couple of steps of a tightrope are considered to be the most dangerous. And you got to go to Eugene. I'm just telling you, if you were a USC fan, this is one I'm circling, underlining, starred. This is going to be the game for USC if they're going to make the college football playoff. This will be one of those games that you really have to take a close look at. Now, for Oregon, they'd love to spoil it. And I say they love to spoil it. We're not even taking into account that Oregon could be in the exact same spot I just talked about USC being in. Could only have one loss. They could be a team that's looking for a college football playoff berth. Heck, Oregon and USC could both be undefeated heading into this game. Could you imagine that? Could you imagine we're living in a world where USC and Oregon both undefeated, and at that point you're assuming that both have a very legitimate chance to make the college football playoff and are assuming they're going to play again in a couple of weeks for a Pac-12 title game. And Oregon, I'll just say this, they have the pieces. They've retooled a little bit through the portal on defense. If that secondary can hold it down and can be improved from a season ago, Bo Nix, if we saw the Bo Nix we saw in 2022, they're going to score a lot of points. Defense holds it down. That's a recipe for a lot of good things to happen for your football team, to say the least. Dan Lanning has built it in a very short amount of time. This game, to me, will have everything from entertainment value to elite quarterback play. It'll be high scoring. It'll be an incredible atmosphere. Game of the year watch, USC and Oregon, without a doubt. So to recap it for you, we've got LSU, Florida State, week 1, neutral site. Going to have everything that you're looking for in a college football game. High intensity, loaded rosters, high stakes. Texas at Bama, hoping we're there. We'll keep you in the know. We'll keep you locked in with that one. The answers we're going to get in that game is really what I'm looking forward to. Penn State at Ohio State, statement game for either result. Ohio State saying, no, we're still one of the big dogs, or Penn State saying, hey, move aside. We gotta take our spot as one of those top 2 teams in the Big Ten for 2023. Should be a lot of fun. Notre Dame at Clemson. It's going to be a attitude game, if you will, for Notre Dame and for Clemson. Notre Dame saying, hey, you got to deal with us in the college football playoff race, and Clemson being able to say, no. We stepped back a little bit a couple years ago, but now we're here again. Now this is a team that's going to make a run and be a college football playoff team. And then USC at Oregon, we could see it twice in a matter of a couple of weeks. Could be a Pac-12 title preview. Both teams that have college football playoff aspirations will get a real good look for what they could be at that point in the year. Incredible atmosphere. I can't wait, man. Less than 100 days away now from college football season. I say 100 days. We're less than 60 days away from college football season. I think week 1 is somewhere around 63 days. But regardless, it is not too far away. Appreciate everybody tuned in live right now. If you could like the video, we'd keep this streak alive of 100 likes per live show before we get off air. Little thumbs up icon under the video. Everybody likes it, and we're in business, okay? So thank you in advance for that. Make sure you're subscribed, podcast, Spotify, Apple Music, wherever you get it. The hard count is there. Just type in the hard count with JD Pickell. Appreciate y'all that have reached out to me and told me how you're listening to us. Because one of my favorite things is to hear where and how you're listening. And I got some people in my DMs this past week, a Georgia fan in London. Just while he's working in his office outside, he's got the Thames River just sitting there. Got the hard count in his ears. Appreciate you tuned in. Another one of y'all hit me up on Twitter, DM'd me and said, you're listening from the labs of Jolly Time Popcorn, a Nebraska fan. So adding a little pop to why you're popping off at work and why you're working on things that pop. So thank you for being tuned in, and thank you for allowing us to be a part of your day. Again, hit me up on Twitter and on Instagram at JD Pickell. Would love to hear from y'all there and hear how you're listening. All right, another reason to be subscribed to the socials is because we want to hear from y'all and involve y'all as much into this show as possible. We can't say we're the people show if we don't involve the people into the show. You feel me? So took to Twitter, and we're going into now the second chapter of what I like to call the great unknowns of college football. And I asked y'all, what are the great unknowns in your mind when it comes to the college football season in 2023? And so without further ado, we're getting some of y'all's answers. Joe F. reached out and said his great unknown is USC's ability on defense to tackle. Joe, that's a very, very fair question. That's the $1 million unknown, if you will, because last year USC missed 156 tackles. It's good for 120th in the country. It's not good. That's not good. It's not going to be good enough to get to where you want to go, to get to where you expect to go in 2023 and make the college football playoff, compete for a national title. Like, we're going to talk about the Trojans here a little bit later in this live show, but they have everything offensively to expect the college football playoff. Goes back to the defensive side of things. So here's where I land on this. I think this falls on Alex Grinch. And I don't mean to just excuse the defensive personnel, but they've upgraded the defensive personnel since last season. Also, to be real, like, these are Division I athletes. These dudes are very much so capable of making the tackles that they're missing, quite frankly. So we look at what tackling requires. Tackling requires a couple of things. One is desire. Okay, you got to want to do it. You got to want to go take another grown man and put him on the ground. The other part of it is it requires a little bit of some comfortability. It requires reps. You got to be comfortable doing it. Got to be familiar doing it. If we're not tackling in practice, I mean, the COVID season's a great example. We saw teams not tackle during practice, saw a ton of missed tackles that season. You got to have some reps doing it. It doesn't have to be live to the ground, but look at a little bit of thud tempo. Wrap these cats up. Like, we need to be able to do that in practice consistently. Third thing, takes positioning. Got to have the right scheme in place. Got to be in the right position to make the tackle. I got to at least be in the right area to make the tackle. So the thing is, with desire, with reps, with scheme, positioning, like all of those things, the defensive coordinator controls or sets the tempo for. So I'm looking at Alex Grinch and I'm saying, okay, if tackling is the issue, that's on the DC. Yes, the players got to make the plays, but I need us to at least have the framework. I need to have the system and the process installed for this to be a priority for our football team. And it would be different if this was the first time we were talking about this with an Alex Grinch coach defense. But look at Oklahoma. This has been a thing that his defenses have been plagued by just a little bit. So there's a lot of pressure on him now with the personnel upgrading. And with Caleb Williams being there for one more year, like, the defense has got to make good on him being there. So we'll talk more about USC a little bit later in the live show. But USC's ability to tackle, absolutely a great unknown, and it's going to be very impactful when it comes to the landscape of the college football playoff. Make sure you're subscribed. Make sure you like the video. All we're going to ask. Thank you in advance for that. All right, moving right along here. Gabriel Rodriguez, the fourth, hit us up and said, how will A&M perform in 2023? He says, the floor is low and the ceiling is high. So here's the reason why the ceiling is so high at Texas A&M. Yeah, they missed a bowl game last year. Last year was last year. Not too worried about that right now as we go to next year. But you look at the roster and how they've recruited. I understand some cats have transferred out. The entire team hasn't transferred out, so this still holds, in my opinion. In 2019, number 4 ranked class. In 2020, 6th ranked class. In 2021, the 8th ranked class. And in 2022, they had the 1st ranked recruiting class. So I'm doing the math here, and even if you want to say some of those guys have transferred out, this is still going to be a football team that has a lot of talent and ability there. They've recruited well enough to compete with some of the big boys throughout the college football landscape. So the way I look at Texas A&M, we got a Ferrari of a roster. Are we able to put it in drive? Are we able to maximize the ability that we have on offense and on defense? And offense is really where you look at, quite frankly, because Bobby Petrino has come in now to be the OC. How much control does he have of that steering wheel? We're going to find out here, I think, pretty quickly. But the floor for Texas A&M, I think we already saw. I can't imagine a season too much worse than last year where you lose to App State. But the ceiling for Texas A&M, I think, is fascinating. And just throw wins and losses out of it for a second. Like, could Texas A&M be a 9-win football team? Sure. But look at who they play. Look at the ripple effect they could put on the rest of college football, man. They could put a dent in this college football playoff race. They play Bama in College Station. Remember, Texas A&M almost beat Bama at Bama last year. At Tennessee, who knows what they're going to be? They're a team that I think deserves some college football playoff attention. At LSU, they're thinking college football playoff. Like, if Texas A&M were to be on their game and to be a force, let's just say they show up for one of those games. That changes the complexion of the entire college football playoff race. So the ceiling for Texas A&M, in my opinion, would be beating any one of those teams. That's what I'd be rooting for if I'm a Texas A&M fan, or one of the things I'd be watching closely for at least. Obviously, you're rooting for a lot more than that, but I think that needs to be taken into account because they're a high-impact team in my mind when it comes to what they have available at Texas A&M. Peter Marvin, his great unknown is, will Florida State's transfers perform or hold them back? And when he talks about performing versus holding them back, I'm not so worried about the performance side of things holding us back. My question with holding Florida State back with these transfers is, do they hold us back culturally? Because Florida State has the #1 returning production in all of college football. A lot of guys back. And that talent is important. But you look at what they did a season ago, I think that culture in place in Tallahassee is the most important thing you got to protect. A team that lost 3 games, bounced right back, finished the season strong. A team that had a lead against LSU in week 1, and they let them back in the game, and then they blocked the PAT to win it. Like, I know what this team is made of culture-wise, but you add 12 new transfers into that thing. That adds some other factors you got to deal with. That adds a little bit of extra, hey, everybody's got to be on the same page. Got to get everybody on board. Culture has to be protected. So I'm curious to see how those transfers are able to mesh with that culture. But from a performance standpoint, the question I'd be asking, the question I'm asking personally is, does the transfers perform enough to push them over the edge? I don't think they'll hold them back. I think they have a chance to push them over the edge and win an ACC title and compete for a college football playoff berth because they brought in some playmakers offensively. Keon Coleman, Jaheim Bell. Like, they brought in some guys that have a chance to add to that production. And they brought in some depth on the defensive line to ensure they don't run into some of those injury bugs they ran into last year. Because if they can score over 35 a game, if they can score over 40 a game, they were 35 a game last year, and they can hold it down on the defensive line and be consistent in that unit, they're going to have a chance. Florida State is going to have a chance. So I'm not so concerned about them holding them back. I'm concerned about how much they could propel them forward, in my humble opinion. Now, when we look at Oklahoma, that's another unknown we got to talk about here. Oklahoma obviously played Florida State close in the bowl game, and one of y'all hit us up, Sooner Born, said, will Oklahoma finally have a defense this year? Been waiting for that answer for a decade. Sooner Born, this is a great unknown, and I'm very glad you asked this question because this is a very, very high impact unknown. If the defense at Oklahoma resembles more of a Brent Venables kind of defense, they could win the Big 12. Because I don't have as many reservations about the offense. I mean, they scored over 30 a game last year. Dylan Gabriel's back. Javante Barnes is a dude. I think they'll have somebody step up on the outside and be explosive for him. Like, I think Oklahoma's offense is going to be good enough. But if the defense, with the personnel they've added, can just do a 180, they're going to have a chance. They're going to have a very legitimate chance. The personnel is where we got to really look because I don't think the scheme is the problem. I think the scheme and what you're asking your players to do is the big variable there. You added Desam McCullough. He's long. He's fast. He's going to be able to rush the pass. You're going to be able to cover. We've talked about this a few times. They've got some freshmen that I think contribute this year. Peyton Bowen, 5-star kid playing safety. Adepoju Adeboare. Some call him PJ. We'll probably call him PJ from here on out because that's just less of a tongue twister. But dude is an absolute dog. We better get used to saying his name a lot. Better figure out how to say his name clearly because he's going to be someone we talk about for years to come in Norman. Like, there's some pieces defensively. And if they're able to mesh from what they brought in from the portal and the players are able to be more comfortable in that scheme, they're going to be a force in the Big 12. You probably look across and see Texas, and that's the one school that you're really thinking has a chance to challenge as well. Obviously, anybody could challenge, but those are the schools that you're looking at from a roster and talent standpoint. Texas offensively could present some issues for you. They did last year. But if that defense, going back to this question, if that defense improves, Oklahoma is going to have a very legitimate chance to win the Big 12, and then we'll see what happens after that. But those are the great unknowns from y'all. We're going to keep doing this series, okay? So make sure you get at me on Twitter, at JD Piquel. Go find this tweet, and we'll retweet it for you, make sure it's out there. But want to hear what you believe are the great unknowns in college football as we get closer and closer to the beautiful thing that is Week 0. All right, make sure everybody that has tuned in right now has liked the video. I'll ask it one more time because we would love to have 100 likes before we get off air. That would make, I think that'd be 9 shows in a row. I think we'd keep that streak alive of having 9 shows in a row of 100 likes before we get off the air. So in advance, thank you. I already have confidence we'll get it done. I'm not even worried about it. I'm just going to say thank you right now for getting us to 100 likes, all right? So this was something that I read that I thought was really, really fascinating, kind of made its way around Twitter, and it is that the Michigan Wolverines had a practice period that they titled Beat Georgia. And so to take a step back here, in college football, each practice is divided by periods. Like the first period is usually stretching, and then maybe it's special teams, then maybe it's individual drills. So you're kind of labeling what each period is during your practice. And Michigan went out of their way to label one of their periods the beat Georgia period of their practice. And I saw this headline, read this story. I absolutely love this from Jim Harbaugh. I absolutely love this because what it is to me is Jim Harbaugh very, very clearly laying out for his football team that they are embracing all the pressure and everything that the mission is going to require for them in 2023. They're not tippy-toeing around their goals. What does it take to win the national title? Probably beating someone from the SEC. Who's the big dog in college football right now? The last 2 years, Georgia. Okay, what's our goal? Win a national title? Sounds like we got to go through Georgia to get there. I love that, man. I love that. You're not worried about what's going to be said on the outside or who thinks this, that, the other. You're making it very, very clear. We want to win a national title. We got to beat Georgia. We're going to focus every single freaking day on doing that. I absolutely love that. Now, here's one thing that's just, I think, so childish, but you'll hear it from the peanut gallery. People are going to say, well, you should have had to beat TCU, period. Give me a break, dude. Give me a break. Is the goal to beat TCU? Is that the end goal for Michigan? Is the goal just to make the national title? No, the goal is to win a national title. Now, Michigan knows they should have beat TCU last year. Michigan knows they had enough self-inflicted wounds to where they cost themselves a chance at playing for a national title last year. Absolutely. Is the goal to beat TCU? Don't think so. It's no secret who the big dog is. It's Georgia. So if we're putting our focus on one thing, that's winning a national title, then the byproduct would be that we beat TCU or whoever the, I guess TCU would be for the 2023 season. The goal is to beat Georgia. The goal is to win a national title. And you're honed in on that and you're focusing on it every single day. And I really love that for Michigan. I love that for their football team and what they're going to be in 23. Now, make sure you're subscribed. Make sure you're locked in. We got some more thoughts on this. We talk ball every day. Would love to have you all a part of this. Thank you in advance for that. So here's another thing that you're going to hear about them doing this beat Georgia period during practice. There's going to be some people that see this and say, well, that's a little bit presumptuous of Michigan and Jim Harbaugh. It's a little bit weird, right? Just assuming they're going to end up at the national title game. They're just already looking past the rest of their schedule and looking at Georgia. Sounds like they're just kind of overlooking everything else. Sounds like they're not taking it one day at a time. I would say that the maturity that this football team has, it's going to allow them to handle a vision. Right? Like maturity as a whole allows you to see the big picture. And Michigan is top 5 in the country when it comes to returning production, so a lot of talent's back. Take it a step further, I think a lot of leadership is back at Michigan. J.J. McCarthy obviously is back. Michael Barrett, he's back. Blake Corum, he's back. Like a lot of the leaders in this locker room are still around. And when you have leadership and maturity, you're able to see what the end goal is. And it doesn't mean that you're looking past your schedule. It doesn't mean that you're just looking all the way to Georgia. It means that actually you have the maturity to understand the importance of each and every moment leading up to that. So beating Georgia isn't just about beating Georgia. Like that's the focus for this practice period, of course. But the understanding is if we want to get a chance to beat Georgia at Michigan, if we want a chance to play for all the marbles in a national title game, then we got to take the beat Georgia period seriously so we can beat Ohio State, so we can beat Michigan State, so we can beat whoever else is in our path. That's what maturity allows you to see. It's not looking past the schedule. It's actually looking more closely at your schedule, looking more closely at the one thing in front of you to get to that game against Georgia, because that's the ultimate goal for Michigan. And again, I just absolutely love this. For what it's worth, Michigan also had a beat Ohio State period in 2021. They're 2-0 since making that drill a reality. And for those of y'all asking what the drill is for the beat Georgia practice period, for Ohio State, when they had this in 2021, my understanding is it was a 9-on-7 drill, which is essentially just like a standard inside run period, but you're labeling it that to have the focus on, okay, we're trying to get after these cats 365 days a year. We're having our attention on when that game comes, we will have already played it out in our mind. We will have already put in the work during practice to get that done. So it's a run drill, I would assume, because that's what it was for the beat Ohio State practice period. But again, I absolutely love this from Michigan. So it's worth saying now, for Michigan, this isn't just like a nice slogan. It's not something you just put on a T-shirt, not something you just sort of put on a practice schedule and say, hey, beat Georgia period. We got that period 7. Make sure you're locked in. This is a team that can really do it. And when I say they can really do it, this is not a prediction. I'm not saying that Michigan should be favored against Georgia on a neutral site. I'm not saying any of that. Georgia's the top dog. You better make sure you respect the top dog when you walk in there. But when I look at what Michigan has on this roster and how they're made up physically, that's the real advantage for Georgia, is the trenches. Like, that's how they've just drugged people the last couple of years. That's how they drugged TCU in the national title game. I think the physicality at Michigan actually matches up okay for Georgia. And when I say they match up, I don't mean they're superior. I mean they're good enough, I think, to hold their own should they find themselves in the game against Georgia. Now, the real caveat to this is J.J. McCarthy and this Michigan offense together able to take that next step forward to where they're able to keep defenses off balance and keep them guessing. Because if you only have one trick and you play against Georgia, I say trick, one approach, which is run the football. We're going to run power run game. That's what we're doing. If that's the only move you have, well, then Georgia, with as physical as they are, they're going to be able to at least account for that without having to commit extra resources on the back end. And I don't mean to get too much into the X's and O's here, but what I'm trying to say is for Michigan to beat Georgia, it will require being able to take that next step in balance in that game. I'm not saying you'll see it for all 12 games. I'm saying when they play Georgia, when and if that game comes, they will need to be able to throw the football downfield consistently. But I absolutely love that we're talking about this right now with Michigan putting a focus on what their goals are, and Jim Harbaugh laying the gauntlet out very, very clearly for his team. Hey, you want to accomplish your goals? It's going to take beating Georgia, or whatever the equivalent of Georgia is in 23. But I personally believe it very well could be the Bulldogs for Michigan to try and win a national title. I love that, man. I love that. And there's so much made about coaches and the way they handle things and the way they operate. Like, people want to say Dabo Swinney's cringy, or Shane Beamer's cringy, or Jim Harbaugh's cringy. Notice people only say those kind of things when those teams are losing. Like Dabo Swinney, when Clemson's winning and they're playing for the national title and they're in the college football playoff, people are saying, wow, Dabo Swinney, man, he just loves his guys. Beats to his own drum. He's dancing in the locker room because he loves his guys. That's awesome. Same thing with Shane Beamer. Preseason, if South Carolina is not going to be that team that's, having as much buzz around them, people are saying, man, that's just kind of dorky. But when they beat Tennessee, when they beat Clemson, then everyone's saying, man, Shane Beamer, players coach. Absolutely love it. Players coach. Shane Beamer, that's our guy. Never doubted him for a second. Jim Harbaugh wears the khakis, and he says he takes a vitamin every day that's called steak, which I think is just an alpha move to begin with. I absolutely love that. When they're not beating Ohio State, Jim Harbaugh is kind of quirky. Maybe he's not the right guy for the job. His system's outdated. When they beat Ohio State and make the college football playoff 2 years in a row, now he's a visionary. Now he's done it his way. Now he's the guy who's the architect behind all Michigan's success. So just pay attention to that. I would be a little bit slow for all of us to jump on those bandwagons of this coach is cringy, he's dorky. Well, when he's winning, seems like the tune sort of changes around him. Now, I'll say this too. I know that y'all don't do that because y'all are program people, but I just thought that we should all maybe circle up together and have that conversation because, it's just good for us to be able to stay ahead of some of this just malarkey that's out there. Malarkey. That's probably the first time we've said malarkey on this show, if I had to guess. But anyways, the beat goes on. Schedule predictions season, record predictions season. It's upon us. It's talking season. I've said so many times we're less than 60 days away from some absolute toe meat and leather. Going to be a good time. The USC Trojans step on into the batter's box, my friend. What can we expect from the Trojans in 2023 from a wins and losses perspective? Well, when you look at USC this year, to me, it's all about seizing the opportunity. And the opportunity in front of USC is one more year with the best player / quarterback in all of college football, and that is Caleb Williams. The goal for USC is, can you make him not just your equalizer, but can you make him your edge in every single football game? And y'all know what I'm talking about. It's the same song, probably 37th verse we've talked about with USC. The defense has to be improved. And when I say improved, I just mean it has to be good enough to where you're not playing catch-up for the USC offense. It's not, man, we're in a shootout. It's 42-41, and that wasn't good enough, and this, that, and the other. Like, no. Caleb Williams is going to give you buckets pretty much every night. Pretty much every time he laces it up, he's going to be a force for you. If the defense can hold it down on their side of things and allow him to separate, allow that USC offense to separate, they're going to be in really good shape. But last year, obviously that wasn't the case. 30 points a game allowed. They got gashed against Utah, against Utah and Tulane. They were 103rd in the country on third down last year. It's not good enough. Everybody in LA knows that's not good enough. And here's the impressive thing to me about Lincoln Riley. We'll talk about that in a second. Make sure you're subscribed. Make sure you've liked the video. Make sure you're following me on Twitter, on Instagram, at JD Piquel. Okay? Thank you in advance. All right, so back from that cliffhanger. The interesting thing and the impressive thing to me about USC this offseason is the way Lincoln Riley has addressed the roster through the portal. You're saying, well, JD, he always goes to the portal. We know that's how Lincoln Riley, that's how he gets down. Like, he's going to go to the portal. Yes, I understand that. But the pieces they've added, to me, are showing a lot of self-awareness with Lincoln Riley. Because whenever, you have your weaknesses, it's not fun to look in the mirror and look at your weaknesses. We'd much rather go back to what we're comfortable with and lean into our strengths. Lincoln Riley, he's an offensive guy. And he says, okay, well, we're losing games. Maybe we need to score more points. Maybe I need to get more pieces to put more points on the board. We kind of rev the engine on the horsepower offensively. That would have been the easy thing to do. Instead, he goes to the portal and takes 8 of the 14 guys from the transfer portal on the defensive side. 6 of those guys on the defensive side were what I like to call trench players. So like linebackers, edge defenders, defensive linemen, guys that are going to make your football team tougher within that front 7. That was the emphasis for Lincoln Riley through the transfer portal. And that's self-awareness to me. Like, USC is built like a speedboat. We've compared a lot of teams to speedboats on this show. We'll do one more with USC. They're a speedboat. They have the ability to go fast. But you see now the speedboat's taking on a little bit of water. Everyone's saying, hey, coach, taking on some water here. The defense is allowing 30 points a game. We got problems. You have 2 choices. You can say, okay, we're a speedboat. Let's go faster and get to shore and just gun it and try to find a way to get through there. Or you have the self-awareness, the humility to say, okay, let's take a step back. Let's address that. What do we need to do to fix that? And that's what I saw them do in the portal, if I'm being honest with you. That's the way that I think they handled it this past offseason, and I think that's going to be a benefit to them when it comes to the 2023 season. Now, when you look at the defense, I don't think that the personnel is the issue anymore. Like last year, you could have made some excuses that they were getting into the scheme and there were some guys that maybe didn't fit and maybe they didn't have what they needed defensively. With what they did through the portal, what I just mentioned, adding a Bear Alexander from Georgia, adding an Anthony Lucas, who is highly recruited, highly rated out of high school from Texas A&M, going and adding some other pieces with Mason Cobb, the linebacker from Oklahoma State. The personnel, in my opinion, is at least up to par in the Pac-12. It's at least good enough to get to where you expect to go. So now the pressure shifts back to the defensive coordinator, Alex Grinch. It's got to be, whether it's practice, whether it's scheme, whatever you got to do to be able to get this thing turned around, I think it falls even more so on you this coming year than last year because you got better ingredients. If the ingredients are good enough and the meal isn't good, then whose fault is that? It's on the chef, right? It's on the person working with the ingredients. So with Alex Grinch now, I think you got good ingredients. I think you got what you need defensively to be good enough. Can you put it together? Has to be the year because you get Caleb Williams for one more year. Lincoln Riley is going to recruit the quarterback position well. He's going to have a guy every single year. I would imagine Malachi Nelson's probably the next guy in line. But you got a sure thing as there is in college football and Caleb Williams playing quarterback for you. Make good on that. All right, so for our prediction for USC's record for 23, let's take a quick look at this schedule here. And I really want to focus our attention on the back half, the last 6 games. They have the equivalent of the Pac-12 Hunger Games plus Notre Dame. And oh, by the way, Notre Dame has playoff aspirations themselves this coming season. So you go to South Bend, and then you got Utah. You got a nice little trip at Cal, sandwiched in between a game against Washington. And then you got at Oregon and you have UCLA in Los Angeles. Obviously, it'll be virtually a home game with it being in the Rose Bowl because I'm sure your fans will travel well. You hear what I'm saying? This is going to be a gauntlet for USC. And I'll say this, at Cal, that just screams trap game to me. It screams sneaky to me, but not predicting it. I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think they'll lose to Cal, but that's the one game where I'm like, man, I just wish they were playing that one at home from a USC fan. For them to be able to do what they want to do, it's going to come down to a couple of things. Like we talked about, defense playing well and the offense holding up their end of the deal, like that's all part of it. The major caveat for me is the transfers gelling. Because you've added some new pieces now with Dorian Singer at wide receiver and Marshawn Lloyd at running back and all the pieces we've already talked about on the defensive side. Those guys aren't just going to be role players for USC. Those aren't going to be dudes that just trot out there and you ask them to play a couple of snaps for you. No, those dudes, I would expect the majority will be starters. Especially the guys that I just named. They will start for USC. They will play a major role for USC. So them being able to fit seamlessly in with that locker room and fit seamlessly in and adapt to the way USC does things, pick up the playbook, like that's all a very real thing. It's very difficult to go from one place to another, especially if you miss spring football, as Bear Alexander did. It's tough to adjust. It's tough to adjust, and it has to happen for USC to get to where they want to go. So when you look at the schedule, I think 9-3 is definitely something you could see happening. I mean, heck, you got to go at Oregon. Utah's been a problem for you in the past couple of seasons. I mean, Washington, who knows what they're going to be. You could see 9-3 on here. I think you could also very realistically see 12-0. Caleb Williams in every single game will give you a chance. The best player in college football. There might be a day where you don't have it and he just takes over and you end up winning the game. Like that could be the way USC wins some of these games. But for me, I think Caleb Williams, plus the improvement on the personnel side defensively, plus the little chip on their shoulder they got right now, I think USC knows what's being said about them and them not being tough enough and they can't win the big one and they lost to Tulane. Like all the talk about them and how they ended last year, I think that's added some extra fuel to the fire in Los Angeles. So I'm going to go ahead and pick USC to finish this coming season in 2023 11-1. They go 11-1, probably puts them in the Pac-12 title game. You're probably playing someone like Washington or Oregon or Utah, so you probably got a rematch on your hands. Just keep an eye out for the Trojans. I would not be surprised if they find themselves in the Pac-12 title game with a chance to punch their ticket to the college football playoff during conference championship weekend. I'm just saying. Keep an eye on the Trojans, man. The West Coast gets a lot of flack. A lot of flack for the good people on the West Coast. Oregon, USC, Washington, Utah, they play good ball out there, man. USC could be that team to sort of announce that the Pac-12 is going to be a force. And then they're leaving for the Big Ten. So maybe that's all a moot point. Appreciate everybody tuned in live. Listen, we got 18 likes and we're at 100. So if you could do a thumbs up on the video, that'd be phenomenal. And we'd be at our goal. I think that makes it a smooth 9 in a row. Nice round number. Bring it on now. Keeper of the queue to answer some of y'all's college football questions and concerns and thoughts. Heavy lifter extraordinaire, Nick Brake. Nick, how we doing, my man?
What's up, JD? It's good to see you, man.
You're looking good.
Appreciate it. Likewise. Question from Jonathan. This is kind of a hot take kind of question. Could Nebraska be a dark horse for the Big Ten championship?
Oof. Okay. Could they be a dark horse? That'd be a horse. I'll say that. There'd be a horse that's kind of like pacing in the back. It would be wildly surprising if they were to be a team that finds themselves in the Big Ten title race. The only thing that I would say about Nebraska and their Big Ten title aspirations, who's the big dog in the Big Ten West? Like, I probably would say Wisconsin if I had to pick today for that side of the Big Ten, but, like, we don't know what they're going to be. We don't know how much of an impact Nebraska's going to have with Matt Rule. So I would be wildly surprised if that were the case. But if you're having an argument for Nebraska to find themselves in Indy for the conference title game, you're probably arguing, well, maybe the Big Ten West just doesn't put it together and Nebraska clicks quickly and Jeff Simmons is that guy. Like, it would take a lot in my mind. So I'm going to go ahead and say I'm not going to put them on dark horse watch for the Big Ten title, but I see a path. How about that? I see a path. I could see a way that it happens.
Okay, JD. Second, Joseph, hashtag asks JD, what's your favorite college football moment? For me, it's when Wisconsin played jump around after the COVID season with no fans.
Ooh, I remember exactly where I was for that. So I'll start with addressing
like 2 years ago, JD.
I remember that exactly. I remember that. I was sitting on my couch in Waco, Texas, and I believe my girlfriend then, wife now, was sleeping on the couch, and Jump Around came on. And Fox, credit to Fox, they zoomed out on the broadcast, and they showed the entire stadium just bumping with Jump Around. And that was the moment, Nick, where it felt like, man, we're back. College football is back. We had a rough year. It was a rough year for everybody, rough year for the sport. And that was like the first piece of, okay, we got some normalcy back. That was phenomenal. Jenny Taft was doing sideline for the game. She was jumping around. Like, I was jumping around in my living room, and my girlfriend woke up and she's like, what is going on? Why are you jumping around? And I was like, I'm so sorry. College football is back. That was essentially what happened. Again, girlfriend then, wife now. My favorite moment, man, that's a tough one. For me, my favorite moment as a college football fan, I hesitate to answer this because I don't want someone to think I'm picking a team somehow. For me, my earliest memory being at a college football game was USC, UCLA, growing up in Southern California, rivalry game. We're there all day. It's a night game. And UCLA is kind of having a down year, and it's one of Pete Carroll's last years at USC. And UCLA is going to lose the game. And USC is starting to run the football and, kind of taking the air out of the game. I think there's like 2 minutes left. It's about to be finished. So you would think UCLA, okay, game's probably out of reach. I think they were down like 10 points at that point, maybe 9 points. It was 2 scores. And so UCLA starts calling timeouts, and the entire Coliseum starts booing. And me being however old I was, I guess I was in grade school at that point in time, I'm like, why are they booing? Why are we upset UCLA is calling timeouts? And I realized it was because UCLA was refusing to take their defeat in that game. And so Pete Carroll, with it being a rivalry game, dials up some play action, and I believe it was Matt Barkley playing quarterback, hits a deep post shot to Damian Williams, and the roof blows off the Coliseum. And the sidelines, it wasn't a full-on fight, but both the sidelines came off their respective benches and started walking towards midfield. And I'm a grade schooler watching this from the last row of the Coliseum like, this is awesome. This is what college football rivalries are. Holy smokes. It's that or being on the field before Michigan, Ohio State. Those have to be the top 2 for me. Absolutely electric atmospheres. And that's my favorite memory because that was like my first introduction into what college football is. And just the pageantry, the passion, all of it was very, very special. Nick, before we get to the next question, shout out y'all. I already thanked y'all earlier in the show because I knew we were going to get there, but over 100 likes. Big, big thank you to y'all. The streak goes on. We're at 9 shows in a row now, 100 likes before we get off air. So that means 4th of July. Well, I guess we'll be premiere show on 4th of July. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But we got our 10th show in a row coming up here for 100 likes. So thank you in advance for that. The show goes on. Roll, party, roll.
Michael Stamper, is Oregon State a Pac-12 contender?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Jonathan Smith has got those boys playing down there. Everyone talks about Utah, Oregon, USC, Washington, because we're guilty of that as well. But they are a tough football team, got a tough identity, and they arguably upgraded at quarterback. I say arguably. I believe they upgraded at quarterback. I think DJU is going to bounce back from what people have been saying about him in his time at Clemson. I think Oregon State has to be dealt with, trifled with, truffled with. You hear what I'm saying? I think Oregon State's a contender in the Pac-12 for sure. Nick, that Pac-12 conference, man, I don't know how we get out there. I don't know how we would find a way to get out to the West Coast, like what game would draw us there. But it's going to be absolute gladiator style in that conference, dude. Yeah. It's going to be crazy. It's going to be crazy. There's going to be so many good games, and I hope one team rises up above the rest to make the college football playoff to represent the Pac-12 to kind of make a statement. But it's going to be good football in the Pac-12. Best coast, in my humble opinion.
It'll be fun, but that's an intriguing thing. I don't know if it will be. If they're beating each other up, JD, it's going to be bad news for the Pac-12 getting into the playoffs. But the next question, Ferris Khan asks JD, does Michigan putting an emphasis on Georgia distract them from beat Ohio? And then in parentheses, State.
That's a good question. So we talked about that a little bit earlier. I really don't think that they're overlooking Ohio State or Penn State just because they have this beat Georgia practice period. It's a fair question. But to me, I think Michigan's maturity as a football team, all the guys that they have back, I think having their sights set on Georgia during a practice period emphasizes you got to beat Georgia, of course, but I think it also emphasizes to the same degree, like, hey, we want to win the games to be able to beat Georgia. We want to win the games in September, October, November to be able to play against Georgia. So I think keeping that big picture vision is important, but I don't believe that you play football for the University of Michigan and somehow lose sight of what the game means. So fair question. I understand the concern. I would answer no. What do you say, Nick? We got time for 2 more?
I think 2 more is probably
Let's do it.
a pretty fair. How about Jonathan? Ask JD, what's your top 3 Big Ten games this season that are must watch?
This is. I don't want to say easy, but
easy.
I think the ones you talk about are Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, Michigan, Penn State, Ohio State. Just because those 3 games to me will determine that side of the Big Ten and probably determine the Big Ten championship. So those are the way that I would lean right now. I'm also curious to see, this may not be the game of the year, but Nebraska, Wisconsin, both schools with new head coaches, Wisconsin going into the new era under Luke Fickell, Nebraska kind of trying to turn things around. Like, I'm very excited to see what that game presents as well. So also Ohio State, Wisconsin. There's a lot of good games, but I'm sticking with those 3 of Ohio State, Michigan, Michigan, Penn State, Ohio State, Penn State. Can Penn State solidify themselves as a top team in the Big Ten? We're going to find out this year. A lot of people in State College think so, but they got the quarterback that they're betting on in Drew Aller. So great question, though.
JD, last question. Sean Nelson. Ask JD, who is your top 5 offenses in 2023? Sean says USC, Georgia, Ohio State, Michigan, and Washington to round out his top 5. What do you think?
Interesting. Top 5, we'll kind of go off the dome here, no order. USC, Caleb Williams, and the firepower with Lincoln Riley, they're always going to be a force. How about this? Tennessee. They're going to spread you out. I'm buying stock in Josh Heupel. I think they're going to be electric this season. I think Georgia, their balance is still going to be there. Carson Beck is still going to be, I think, a guy that keeps that whole thing rolling. The offensive line is still dominant. Like, Georgia's still going to be Georgia, even though Stetson Bennett's not there, even though Todd Monken's not there. I would say Michigan is also a good one to put in there. They scored over 40 a game last year. And then I'll probably go Ohio State as well. Some dark horses, some teams that maybe are on the outside looking in. Nick, what about Clemson? Garrett Riley, Broyles Award winner last year, and what he did at TCU. If they can have a version of that come to fruition at Clemson with Cade Klubnik, it would require the skill players stepping up and having that explosivity there. But keep an eye on Clemson. I'm not picking them, but keep an eye on Clemson. Let's take a look also at Penn State. If Penn State is able to accomplish what they want to accomplish in 2023, it'll be because Drew Aller is just that dude, and he is as advertised. But you got Nick Singleton, Katron Allen behind him, 2 of the best backs in the country. They're going to have a chance. One more for you, Texas. So you asked for 5. I think we gave you 8. So Texas also, I think, with all their weapons, with all the ability with Quinn Ewers, they're a Ferrari. If they're able to be consistent, Quinn Ewers is able to kind of find that sweet spot, they're going to be really, really good. So you asked for 5, we gave you 8. But, Nick, appreciate you holding it down, man.
I do. Hey, really quick, I see some WKU love in the chat. Is Austin Reed a top 10 quarterback in college football? What do you think, JD, really quick?
Golly, man. I'd have to sit down and break it up. I'll say this.
So.
He, I think, will have a very legitimate chance to be a NFL top 3-round draft pick, is what we're hearing at least. Like, the people were impressed with him at the Manning Passing Academy. Top 10, I don't know. I gotta sit down and jot this one down if we're going to go with the list for the top 10 and put Austin Reed in there. He's really good. A lot of schools wanted him.
Yeah.
We'll say that. A lot of schools wanted him at the portal.
We'll go with that, JD. Man, I'll see you later.
Nick, appreciate you, brother. Again, Nick Brake, best in the business, holding it down. Some WKU love in the chat, man. We love to see it. Tops on top. Before we get out of here, I want to let y'all know, if you think we're not going to have a show on 4th of July, out of your mind. We will still have a show. It will be premiering on the YouTube channel, same time as always, 10 a.m. Central, 11 a.m. Eastern. If you want to catch it there, can also find it on the podcast feed. Apple, Spotify, type in the hard count with JD Piquel. It's going to pop up. We're going to have a real good time. Appreciate y'all rocking with us. Appreciate y'all just being psychos for this sport just like us. We love y'all. We appreciate y'all. We're going to keep this party rolling, and we will see y'all next time.